Welcome to Wesley Impact. In my thought for today, I'd like to encourage you to consider a passage from John 10, which I think is appropriate on this Anzac Day weekend. We take a look at Wesley Mission's employment and career opportunities for people with disabilities. And as we reflect on this Anzac Day long weekend, we take a look at the work of landscape painter Idris Murphy. Idris travelled to Gallipoli carrying the letters of an Anzac soldier he'd never met but whose name he inherited. The letters detailing his grandfather's experience of war and the journey inspired an artwork which won the Gallipoli Art Prize last year. Idris joins me to tell us more. Idris, thanks for joining us.
Oh, good to be here.
Look, Idris, or Idris, if you come from Wales, it's Idris, you know.
It is.
But Idris, you really have the story. How did it all come to you to be important? You came to know about Gallipoli and grandfather?
Well, Gallipoli in our family was not a big deal particularly, but I knew my grandfather had fought at Gallipoli, so that was kind of important. But I found out that when my mother died not long ago, she'd left a whole lot of family papers, which took a while to actually go through and have a look at. But she did tell me one thing was there was a letter from Gallipoli from my grandfather, which I should keep.
One letter?
One letter.
But there wasn't one letter,
No,
was
there wasn't. There was 160 letters from my grandfather writing to what turned out to be my grandmother. But in fact, it was the girlfriend, Violet. And basically they're love letters. But then letters filled with all those sorts of things about where I am and, you know, what the weather's like and, you know, fighting in the trenches. I mean, extraordinary stuff that I'm finding about my grandfather.
And precious to have kept him for her.
For very, very precious. She was very close to her dad, and my grandfather did come back, and obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Look, one of the things that's true is your grandfather's letter highlight, I think, some of the good things that even in the midst of the horror of war, we should tell.
I think that's right. I mean, the letter underscores what Jeff Dyer in his book Missing the Somme also underlies, is that in this horror, this carnage, whatever word you want to use for it, out of that, which should have destroyed any notion of any fair play or concern. There has been moments which that's been turned on its head, and my grandfather's, one of those letters from Gallipoli, describes one of those moments.
What sort of things?
Well, in this case, it was a rapprochement, a kind of armistice, which wasn't the official armistice, in Gallipoli towards the end of the war, where basically grandfather's area of trenches threw to the other side, to the Turks, some jam, tin jam and bully beef, and the Turks, because they were so close, just raked them in, and the Turks threw back tobacco and cigarettes and letters written in French saying, how about some souvenirs? And also at one stage they said, have you got a good knife? Presumably, you know, a 2-foot long bayonet. It's not exactly worthwhile for putting jam on toast or something.
Look, that's a good thing, because we hear about them playing football between Germans and Brits, but this is really a good Aussie story.
It is, and I think the pathos or the kind of the heart-thumping kind of thing for me, reading this letter for the first time, and he writing to my grandmother and saying, well, look, this is what happened, and then the clanger, if you like, is that the Turks wrote at the end of these letters, but particularly a couple of them, your friend the enemy.
Let me just ask about Gallipoli evening, the painting.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Well, I've been twice, and so the first time was only short time, and I went with some artist friends and mates and my wife, and for me it was just I need to go to Gallipoli or going to Istanbul, so forth, but actually going there was not what I expected. I think it was very difficult trying to describe the emotional kind of thing of walking around the neck, where you actually walked on your dead, you know, grandparents' peers and so forth.
Let's just hold it there, because that's a deeply moving moment, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. I'm looking forward to talking further with Idris. But before we talk more, I'd like to introduce today's performer. Ann-Maree Keith has written a special song to portray a living history that's ever relevant in the Australian landscape. It's called Anzac Parade.
Driving down Anzac Parade, every tree that stands becomes a man. One by one they smile and wave, standing tall in their uniforms of colours that never fade. And I see your courage and I see your pain. You shone for this nation like a constellation, so fearfully, wonderfully made. And a bright star fell each time the price was paid. Avenue goes on and on. Oh, how did it ever grow this long? One girl's brother, one man's son. Well, it seems so foolish, seems so wrong. We see your courage and we see your pain. You shone for this nation like a constellation, so fearfully, wonderfully made. And a bright star fell each time the price was paid. And I only see you when I'm passing through, but the one who always sees you understands what you went through, 'cause you reflect him in what you chose to do. He was a fallen hero, just like you. And I see your courage and I see your pain. You shone for this nation like a constellation, so fearfully, wonderfully made. And a bright star fell when the price was paid, but it rose again, yeah.
Be inspired by Keith Garner's new book, The Authentic Australian Evangelist, Alan Walker. Former Superintendent Alan Walker was once labelled the conscience of the nation, speaking out for the marginalised and the broken across social, political and international debate. Alan's life and work at Wesley Mission is also featured in an address by Keith Garner on DVD. For more information, call 1800 021 821 or visit our website wesleymission.org.au.
And if you'd like to know more about Ann-Maree Keith and her album called Reflection, details are going to be online all this week. We're back with landscape artist Idris Murphy. Now, let's come back to that. Not only the painting, but your friend, the Enemy campaign. Tell us about that.
I think the poignancy of that letter was that there was a true kind of moment or short period of time, we don't know from the letters exactly, that they recognised in each other they're just human beings on either side of those trenches. And Grandad does go on to say about the respect for each other in those letters. But, you know, they're caught in this horrible bind, if you like, where they've got to have a war between the two of them.
Futility, really.
It is absolute futility. And in that, later on in the letter, he says, basically, we sent them back a letter written in French saying we've got to draw an end to this giving of gifts and souvenirs and talking like this, and it's going to be all on again in 15 minutes and we'll throw a bomb to let you know. We're starting back to where we were, killing each other again. It's just, it is horribly futile. And I guess the nice thing about this, if there is a nice thing, is that there is this moment of recognition of something more to us than just bodies and bullets.
And wanting to tell that story is important.
Yeah, and you can tell, you know, he's writing to his person he wants to get home to, and, you know, later on he's talking about, well, wasn't it great on Sunday after church we went and had a dance and we went and had a picnic, and will those times happen again? Has
there been a great interest in this story?
Yeah, a lot now. People, I think, the story's been around for a while. The War Memorial has some information about it too, but this is the first letter that I know of that actually came from that event. So, and it's just surfaced in the last couple of years.
Tell me a little bit about, for you, the link between your Christian faith and your art.
Well, I mean, I guess it's it's a long story. Television's not going to get you all that in one hit, is it? But my grandmother was a very strong Christian lady, and so her example, you know, after my grandfather died and I lived with my grandmother, that was probably the start of my thinking seriously about something more than the next job or what I was going to do when I grew up or whatever. So that has continued. And in fact, I'm reading at the moment Simone Veil, who's a wonderful, mystic, extraordinary woman, and her accounts of war and how we perceive it have been remarkably changing the way I think about the whole
Was there a
thing.
particular moment when the Christian faith became alive for you, or was it through this whole experience?
It's been a long-term thing. I became a Christian in what Christians would understand as a kind of a moment of knowing when I was about 16. It was pretty naive stuff, but nevertheless it was real. And so that's been an ongoing kind of interesting battle between faith and intellect and not wanting to be involved and being involved. But I'm probably more interested now, not so much in the Christian institution, but rather how Christians might actually be part of the world and be responsive to that world as well in some way.
Idris, thanks for coming along and sharing with us, especially in this weekend, and perhaps giving us an insight that even in the mess and the guts and the horror of Gallipoli, there are some really good stories as well.
There are moments where things break through which don't happen in everyday life that much. It's under these strains that real things happen, I guess.
Idris, I wish you well for the future. Keep painting and keep inspiring people. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's been 200 years since the first Methodists met in Australia. To celebrate 2 centuries of faith and pioneering care, CEO and presenter Rev Dr Keith Garner takes us back to where it all began.
But we don't begin here at the heart of London. We begin in a town in the north of England.
In this fascinating narrative, Reverend Garner chronicles the history of the life and times of the founder of Methodism, John Wesley. This fresh and thought-provoking documentary takes us on a journey throughout the United Kingdom, beginning in John Wesley's hometown of Epworth.
John Wesley was born here on the 17th of June, 1703.
This 1-hour DVD travels onto his education years and beginnings of social justice in Oxford, to his final years in London. For more information on John Wesley, the man and his mission, call 02 9263 5555 or email us at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
As we've heard today, the Anzacs are a living legacy. Today I want to share with you another living legacy. David Morgan was a man who believed strongly in the heart and commitment of Wesley Mission and its work. Let's take a look together.
The David Morgan Centre began 40 years ago when Alan Walker asked David Morgan if there was something he would like to contribute to Wesley Mission.
I am standing on an acre and a half of land right at the Rydalmere railway station. This land has come to us as a beneficent gift to meet human need in Sydney.
David Morgan had some land that he wanted to use for the purpose of people with a disability or people who were vulnerable in the community.
The day the centre opened, I do remember coming. I remember it was Bill Hayden who actually opened it. The atmosphere was very happy because it was something that had been planned, and at last, here it was.
The David Morgan Centre's come a long way in 40 years. We started with 20 people, we now have 110. Generally, what we do has changed. There used to be a lot of hands-on mechanical products that were put together on the site, but now we generally do repackaging.
At the David Morgan Centre we do a variety of work, both on-site and off-site. On-site in the factory we do products like car care products, we relabel bottles, we also do mail-outs for customers. Also what we do is working with medicinary products and veterinary products and repacking those and labelling those products for customers. Off-site we do a variety of mainly property maintenance services.
My name's Craig Mitchell. I've been here about nearly 15 years and I enjoy working here. I do a bit of cleaning, gardening and lawn mowing and pruning. It's like a family. I've got lots of good friends.
We started back in 1996. We started off with internal Wesley Mission customers. Our major customers nowadays are Telstra, who we do extensive gardening and cleaning work for. We also do a lot of work for Department of Housing. In the last 12 months or so have expanded into graffiti removal.
The crews that go out and do the work for us, they're positive, they get stuck into the work, they love doing it, and just giving people with disability a go, I reckon it's great.
One of the things that's really enjoyable for the staff who work at the David Morgan Centre is the fact that we see people grow and improve. Skills that they have, the capacity to have relationships with the people they work with. Over the years, the David Morgan Centre's had a number of significant events. They had a 25-year celebration. We've had weddings here. So people here have got married to each other. We've had people who have had children.
When I first came here, I was a bit nervous coming here, 1974. I was very young. Jeez, I was a young fella. Look at me now. I like working here because I'm a fencer here. And they're good to me. And I love them.
It is just wonderful to see that it's grown to a thriving, working community, and people can work with self-respect in their jobs. Yes, I think that's very worthwhile.
Today marks the 100th anniversary of the Anzac landings in Gallipoli. This anniversary for those outside of Australia is important to Australians and New Zealanders particularly. It's not a story of victory, but it is a story that helps to define and shape something of the kind of people that we are. Thousands of people travel to Turkey each year to remind themselves of what has happened. Huge numbers of people lost their lives in the First World War. None of us can actually recall those events, but many of us live through the events with the stories that have been carefully passed on to us even today. Now, the role of chaplains in the forces has always been considered important, and the passage that I read from John 10 would have been read many a time by a chaplain in times of conflict to offer comfort, peace, and hope. I'm reading from John 10, verses 11 through to 18. I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. When the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it, the man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must also bring them. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. Jesus has been talking about sheep, and he turns the metaphor around and describes himself as the good shepherd, one who cares for his sheep by laying down his life. Throughout history, people have known what it is to realize that others have laid down their lives for them. Now, such an action demonstrates many things. It demonstrates that the good shepherd really cares for his sheep. It's not merely something that's said. It shows something of the deep truth of what that relationship means. The good shepherd is willing to go even to death for a sheep. This is the extent of the love of God. And when we think of Jesus Christ being willing to lay down his life for us, well, that love is really pushed to the very limits. It's on the perimeters of any kind of expectation on our part. And the good shepherd knows his sheep, and his sheep know him. This intimacy of relationship is so very, very important. Just as we heard in those lovely stories of what actually happened in the mud and in the dirt and in the bombs and amidst the bullets of Gallipoli, we know that human relationships exist. Isn't it a wonderful thing to know, even more than human relationships, that God's love to us has been made clear in Jesus and that he really does have a living relationship with us? There's something very attractive, indeed compelling, about the nature of Jesus as we see him portrayed as the Good Shepherd. For me, it's one of the most endearing of all images. There's a huge contrast between Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and the hired hands, whose actions are so fundamentally different. Even in the challenging circumstances of Gallipoli, many people found grounds for love and compassion and showing it one to the other. This weekend, we should clearly have in mind the sacrifice that many made, of which we are, in a real sense, recipients today. I hope that that helps to give us an insight into something deeper and more profound. And just as chaplains read those words, whether in Gallipoli or at any time of conflict, it also reminds us of one who laid down his life for the sheep of every generation, for this generation. And that gift is in Jesus Christ.
If you would like to know more about today's topic or for more on Keith's message, contact Keith by writing to Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A5555, Sydney South 1235, or email impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
Many thanks for joining us on this special weekend. We leave you with the Cathedral Singers and a very appropriate hymn at this time, Abide With Me. Until next week, goodbye and God bless you.